Would you believe me if I told you that the love of your life could be the end of your soul? On a quiet street in an ordinary neighborhood, a young woman named Alice believed she had found the perfect man. Red roses, candlelit dinners, and a cute little cat with a bow around her neck. But behind the chocolates and the I love yous, there was a secret, an ancient, dark, and deadly secret. What happened to Alice that Valentine's Day night is something that science cannot explain. Something that no one dares to even mention in front of a mirror. Because when the soul disappears, the reflection remains. And what lives on the other side may already be among us. That girl had met a handsome boy. She was excited about the beginning of her relationship. Everything was flowers, chocolate, kisses and hugs. Lots of I love yous and promises of eternal love. She was my neighbor. Her name was Alice. She was in the prime of her youth. She was only 18 years old when everything happened. That afternoon, February 14th, 1989, Alice was happy. It was the first Valentine's Day she would spend with the great love of her life. She had recently turned 18, and that gave her a certain freedom. She could go out, have dinner, and who knows what would come next. I still saw her as the little girl who played with my children, but despite her young age, we had a very close relationship. She told me secrets, shared experiences, and talked to me about her deepest desires. She felt very comfortable pouring all her immaturity about life into my ear. Sometimes I would risk giving her advice, but we know youth well. They seem to know everything. That young man, well-mannered, very friendly and attentive, named Henry, had something strange about him. He was atypical for a young man his age. He didn't have the fervor that runs through the veins of a teenager entering the adulthood house. He didn't seem to want to discover the world like young people usually do. His gaze was enigmatic, inquisitive, and seemed to read people's souls. Being in his presence for too long made me uncomfortable. To Alice, he was the prince who had arrived riding a white horse. To me, he was a young man with the soul of an old man. During that year of dating, Henry always arrived and left at the same time. He always came 3 times a week in a red Mustang with red roses, a box of chocolates, and some other treat. Alice was melting with love. Henry loved her. She would spend the rest of her life with her prince. Honestly, when I heard Alice sing her love in verses and rhymes, I hoped that my strange impressions about Henry were just silly speculations. The biggest of all my speculations began when, after a little over 2 months of dating, Alice brought him to my house so I could get to know him a little better. I have a huge mirror in my living room. Women love mirrors, don't they? But Henry, unlike everyone else who came into my house and stopped to check their appearance in front of the most narcissistic object in the entire universe, absolutely refused to walk in front of it. He stopped a few inches before the mirror and dug his feet into the floor, while Alice insistently pulled him to sit down and get to know me better. No one could make him leave the front door. Neither could my chocolate cake, which had just come out of the oven. My cat, unlike me, seemed to have a great intimacy with the boy, which also struck me as strange because Dawn, that was my cat's name, would run away from anyone who came to visit me. My cat hid very well until the visitor left. But with Henry, it was different. He would rub against his legs and paw his hands so that the boy would pet him. Cats and mirrors have always been mystical, and I have always been a woman fascinated by the hidden side of things. My impression of that attitude was so intense that I began to search my memory for things that could explain Henry's repulsion towards mirrors and the attraction he exerted on cats. I remembered seeing things related to mirrors, such as the 7 years of bad luck being related to the fact that ancient people believed that mirrors reflected their own souls, and if they were broken or cracked, their own soul would be damaged. They believed that every 7 years the soul was renewed, and if a mirror was broken, death would soon arrive. Cats have been worshipped since ancient Egypt. They have extrasensory perception. They see beyond appearances, transmute energies, and are guardians of other worlds. After Henry refused to visit my house with Alice several times, I tried to have an informal conversation with her about my suspicions. What did I gain from that? Alice moved away from me. She began to move away from me gradually, until we only greeted each other from a distance with a wave of the hand. But I liked her a lot, and even from a distance, I still observed the romantic visits of her beloved Henry. That afternoon, as I said, her happiness was evident. After almost 3 months without talking to me, she stopped at my gate while I picked some roses to decorate my house. She started telling me how happy she was. She said she had bought a beautiful gift for Henry and that they would go out together for a romantic dinner. I found it a little strange. After all, it wasn't Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday, the only days Henry had shown up in their 1-year relationship. It was Friday, but it was Valentine's Day. Alice was radiant, beautiful as I had never seen her. She got ready with the style and delicacy of a noble lady. At exactly 8 o'clock at night, I heard the Mustang. Curious, I went to my window. I wanted to see the couple leaving for what would be their first outing away from home. Henry had never taken Alice on any outings. They always stayed home. The most they did was go to an ice cream shop that was on the corner of our street. The boy got out of the car with the usual flowers, chocolates, and a beautiful kitten with a red ribbon around its neck. He handed it to her, and she melted. The kitten was beautiful, furry, big yellow eyes and gray fur. She put everything away and happily left for her romantic date. The next morning, she showed up at my house, happy, smiling, with her kitten named Kymia. That was the name Henry had given the kitten. As soon as she entered my house, the cat stood in front of the mirror. She looked at it as if she were seeing beyond her reflection. I didn't pay much attention. I continued talking to Alice, who told me the details of the date. She soon left. After all, it was Saturday. Henry would be home soon. But he didn't. He didn't come on Tuesday or Thursday. Henry simply disappeared. Alice fell into a deep depression. She couldn't even talk to her love on the phone anymore. The calls kept going to voicemail. The only thing that Henry remembered was Kymia, because the roses and chocolates were no longer there. During that month, young Alice, between her crying fits at my house, told me that Kymia every morning would stand in front of the mirror in her room and scratch it incessantly while meowing. It was as if she were calling someone. The girl was afraid and could never look at the mirror. Instead, she began to cover it during the night, but the kitten would tear off the cloth with her nails and look at her with furious eyes that seemed to turn from yellow to a deep red. The morning Alice tried to tear off the mirror in her room, the cat attacked her ferociously, tearing her skin with her nails and teeth. Frightened by the girl's story, I advised her to get rid of Kymia, but Alice couldn't. The cat was the only reminder of her great love. Alice ended up getting used to Kymia's restless nights, but during those 7 years that followed, she never looked in the mirror at dawn. It was the morning of February 14, 1996. Ever since Henry disappeared, Alice had never met anyone who could take her heart like he did. For her, that day had become torture, because it was the last day she saw him. She, now 25 years old, lived alone in the house that belonged to her parents. They had both died in their sleep, exactly 3 years apart. First it was her father, 3 years later her mother. No one could ever explain exactly what happened, and so they said it was cardiac arrest. But their faces, God, I don't like to remember. Their expressions were of complete terror. Alice sat at the door of her house with Kymia on her lap. She had just arrived home from work. She was exhausted, and she was watching the corner where the Mustang always came. With a longing look, tears were streaming down her eyes. I watched her, my heart aching. I soon looked away when I saw Kymia staring at me. Her eyes were red like flames of fire. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I went in and locked the doors. During the early morning hours, I started hearing very loud noises coming from Alice's house. She was shouting Henry's name. I thought about going there, but I decided against it. I shouldn't interfere. Maybe the great love of her life was back. Dawn came and I waited patiently for Alice, but she didn't show up. She didn't leave for work. I felt uncomfortable and went to her house. I entered slowly. The door was open. I went upstairs calling her name. Getting no response, I continued. The door to her room was half open. I looked through the crack, and the only thing that came out of my mouth was a suppressed scream. Kymia was on top of her, standing on her hind legs. She devoured every bit of Alice while she took on the shape of Henry. I covered my mouth with my hands. My eyes widened. I continued to watch, apathetic, that horror show. Kymia was now Henry. From his half-open abdomen, Kymia emerged, cute as the day she was given Alice as a gift. From the mirror, a deformed soul began to emerge. Alice's lifeless, fleshless body was invaded by that soul, which in moments would transform into a beautiful woman, regenerating itself like a meaningless magic trick. In minutes, Henry and that woman were hugging and kissing. I ran down the stairs, and on the last step, I came across Kymia looking at me with fiery eyes. She advanced on me and attacked me like a ferocious lion. I struggled desperately, but it was in vain. Already on the threshold of death, I saw Henry and his beloved coming down the stairs, passing over my body. In the distance, I heard the unmistakable sound of the Mustang leaving. My soul was carried into the mirror by Kymia. From there, I saw my terrified face and my lifeless body being stuffed into a black bag, the same face that Alice's parents had. I don't know exactly where I am, but I know that Henry will return soon with his Mustang. He will bring roses, chocolates, and Kymia as a gift for Valentine's Day, and he will give them to the next woman who will serve as food for one of the demons that live on the other side of the mirror so that they can inhabit our world every 7 years.